Siege has seen some extremely weak operators release over the evolution of its content and balancing, and it is extremely rare for an operator to make a comeback from being in such a poor position. However, the operator we're talking about today was an exception to this rule, releasing in one of the weakest states we had ever seen an operator and managing to climb their way all the way back to being one of the best operators in the game. So follow me as I tell the story of the comeback of Rainbow Six Siege's worst operator. Now, for the sake of today's story, we must go back to Operation Brutal Swarm, which was released on September 6, 2022. This season was controversial, to say the least, and that is for a few main reasons. Firstly, the new map for the season, Stadium. And the reason they decided to make the new map Stadium is because the new map Ubisoft was working on needed more time in the oven, so they decided to just rush out Stadium instead, so that way they could have an extra season of development time. Unfortunately, it played horribly for ranked. This map was not designed for it. It was designed for the SI event back in 2021. And it was never meant to be released as a permanent map. And because of all of its clear flaws, the map would quickly become the second most banned in ranked. However, what we are here for today is the operator. And the operator that came with the release of Brutal Swarm was Grim, the topic of today's video. He, as many of you know if you played at the time, was the weakest operator Siege had ever seen. His gadget was his bee launcher that could be used to deploy bees around the map. These bees could be used to ping enemy opponents, revealing their position. However, the launcher was clunky, which made it impossible to use without dying or being left with extremely low HP after using it. And even if you did manage to get some sort of utility out of it, all the bees would do was ping an opponent you already knew the location of. And the pings didn't last that long. His guns may have been decent, which in the meta at the time was important, but what was also important was secondary gadgets, which people were becoming more and more reliant on. And Grim also happened to lack in that department as well, which made him even worse. Because of all of these limiting factors, he was really hard to justify bringing in most teams' rosters, and he quickly became the least picked operator in the game. This would result in posts across social media being made about the state of Grim, and considering that Ubisoft's previous operator was Sins, another operator considered to be terrible amongst the competition, the community was not happy with Ubisoft. People were begging for them to do something, because as it stood, Grim was not being picked and you were never seeing him in games. However, Ubisoft really wouldn't do anything to address him for a very long time, with the first balancing change going his way in Year 8 Season 2, also known as Operation Dread Factor. Operation Dread Factor released on May 30th, 2023, nearly a year after Grim had launched, and this season would take some massive steps in improving the game and adding great content. One of the major ways they did this was via the new operator that was added this patch, Fenrir. He was the first trap operator Ubisoft had released in a decent amount of time, and trust me when I say he changed the meta forever. Fenrir's gadget, his dread mines, are remotely activated mines that when detonated by an attacker walking into them, will deploy gas that will reduce the attacker's visibility significantly. Due to these mines being able to be thrown onto the ceiling or hidden behind furniture, they could be a real pain for the attackers to deal with. But if they were spotted, they could be shot as long as Fenrir had them active, so they could be countered. The strength of these traps was mainly in their ability to provide info to the team. That was because when one of these dread mines went off, they would make a loud noise and they would inform Fenrir once detonated. This makes them a valuable tool for detecting a potential push from the attackers. Also, the blindness effect that it was inflicted onto the attackers made the mines a great way to slow them down as well. Due to their versatility, Fenrir's amazing weapon loadout, and his secondary shotgun, he would become a very popular operator at high ranks and in professional play, unlike Grim around this time. And the season wouldn't stop its effects on the meta just with the new operator, because we actually got a map with this season, which was a first in a very long time. That map was the rework for Consulate. This rework solved a lot of the problems with the original by negating the huge amount of runouts and spawn peaks available. It was still a somewhat controversial map, but it's been received a lot better as time has gone on. And then for balancing changes, this season continued its trend of switching up the meta. And that's because in this season, Ubisoft decided to nerf Knock by removing her ability to reduce movement sounds. They decided to nerf Thunderbird heavily. Alibi lost her shield and impacts, so that way they could hopefully lower her quite high pick rate. And the new observation blockers were given to a wide range of operators. These changes really did switch things up by nerfing some heavily problematic operators on both platforms. But the thing most people were excited about was the Grim rework. This rework accomplished a slew of changes to him. Firstly, he got access to the bailiff and secondary heartbreach charges, which made him much more versatile and allowed him to more effectively compete against other operators that just outdid him on the utility front. But he also got a fundamental rework to his gadget. His launcher got its equip time reduced by 1 second, and his fire rate increased to 70 RPM, making it feel feel a lot less clunky, then the actual bees that deployed out of his launcher got buffs as well, reducing activation time significantly, increasing the duration and the radius, and the pings provided happened in much quicker succession. Overall, his launcher was much more useful pretty much overnight. You could use him to execute on the site or onto a power position without being at risk, and he was much stronger than he ever was in the post plant. And to top it all off, his whole loadout became a whole lot better as well. However, Ubisoft wasn't done, and the next update would really put Grim on the map. That update was Operation Heavy Metal. Operation Heavy Metal would be released on August 29th, 2023, and this season had a lot of balancing changes and new content that helped to continue what Dread Factor started. The operator we got in the season was Ram. She was an operator designed to compete with other vertical play operators, and she did so quite effectively. Her advantages are that her auto breachers allow her to breach floors from safety, they produce a lot of sound that can mask audio cues, and that she has one of the best loadouts in the game. So Ram would already be an influential figure in the meta, but unfortunately, everything wouldn't be sunshines and rainbows with this update, because this season would be when the addition of the quick match rework would be added. This rework made the prep phase much shorter, had reinforcements pre-placed for the defense, and its goal was to make matches faster. This did not go along with the state of the game at the time. The game was already struggling with an aggression issue due to rank 2.0 and the 1.5, so making a change dedicated towards making games faster was not a good idea. It really wasn't a positive change, and people saw its problems from the start. It made quick matches unfun, and it made it feel less like Siege. However, to make up for this, we did get some great balancing changes. Ubisoft gave a buff to Legion, they decided to rework shotguns, they took away Iana's nades to hopefully kill her lifelong domination, and they nerfed Frost via her gadget rework. Overall, most of these balancing changes were positive. The same thing can be said about the second half of the Grim buff Ubisoft added this season, which would change him into the operator he is today. This rework added firing modes to Grim's launcher. These firing modes gave Grim two options. One that allowed Grim to shoot his bees directly straight at a position, like normal, and the other which allowed him to bounce his bees off surfaces. This allowed Grim to use his gadget in ways that wasn't possible before, which opened up the horizons for him in all levels of play. This is around the time when Grim would really start to get his recognition, especially at higher levels, and he had successfully gone from the objectively worst operator in the game to a top tier operator over the course of just a few updates. Ubisoft would give him an additional minor update in Operation Deep Freeze, which replaced his breaching charges with EMPs, but other than that, he hasn't changed since, and he really hasn't needed it. This is the perfect example of what Ubisoft should be focusing on trying to accomplish, buffing operators on the weaker end of the spectrum to hopefully put them in a position where they can actually compete without any further changes. The sad reality is that in Siege, weaker operators typically don't get nearly as much focus from Ubisoft. They will generally prefer to nerf operators instead of buffing them, and a lot of times they end up leaving the weaker operators to rot. Grim is the exception to that story, and he is an example of exactly what Ubisoft should be focusing on, reviving the worst operators and giving them a real comeback. Anyways, that about wraps up today's story. If you enjoyed it, I make Siege content just like this twice a week, so go subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitter if you don't want to miss the next upload. If you want to watch another video just like this one, a video be popping up on your screen right now that I'm sure you all enjoy. I'll see you next time, friends, and peace.